All right, good evening. We're learning Eruvin Daf Samach Daled. And we were learning some agaritas yesterday about making sure that we're not posik lifnei Rabbo. Tonight we're going to be learning a brief halachic Gemara followed by an important halachic Gemara that's unrelated. The Gemara we're going to learn now is a little bit about Chatzer, and then we're going to learn a Gemara about drinking alcohol and how that interplays and interfaces with davening, which is a very important thing to learn. Maybe it would have been kedai to learn before Simchas Torah, but nevertheless, it's very close to the sugya. So we're beginning about 9 lines or so from the bottom of Samach Gimel Amud Beis. Opens the Gemara. Hahu mavoa. There was a mavui to have a dayer bal Lachman Baristik, where a non-Jewish person whose name is Lachman Baristik lived. If you take a look in Tosfos, the second to last Tosfos, about a third from the bottom of the page, Lachman Baristik, Rach Garis Haman. Just an interesting historical note. I could imagine why the following story then took place. Amrulay, they said to him, Ogar lan reshusach, allow us to rent out your space so that we'd be able to carry. Lo ogar luhu, he was not exactly ready to play. He was not interested in renting out his space for whatever the concerns were. So the people who lived in the Mavui were concerned. They wanted to be able to carry, but they were limited because there was a guy who was there. What should he do? So Asu Amrulay la Abai, they told Abai that Lachman Baristik or Haman, whoever he was, wasn't interested in renting out his place. Amar Lahu, he gave them the following eitzah. Zilu, Betilu Rishu Saichu Legabechad. Everyone in the Chatzer, everyone who's sharing the Mavui, be mevatel your rishus to one another. So for all of us here, we'll be mevatel our rishus all by one of us. We all share the same Mavui. And then Havala Yachid b'ma'ah, it's a chap. Then it's Havala Yachid b'makom nachri. Then you only have one Jew and one non-Jew. And there, we don't paskin like the strict shita in our opinion. We paskin like Rabbi ben Yaakov. So that's perfect. Why not? The Yachid b'makom nachri lo asar. Beautiful idea. Amrulay, the bnei mavui, all the people who lived there, they said back to Abai, hold on 1 second. Midihu taima, the whole svara as to why Rabbi ben Yaakov was matir one person to live in the same place as a goy, but not to allow 2 people, was because you were going on assumptions of what the norm was. But here, I'm not asking you to make an assumption. I'm telling you what's happening. It's not, we're not halachically assuming that it's rare. I'm telling you the Maseches. We have one house here. Now it's really 5 people who were about Mavatal the Rishus. So this is not the theoretical case anymore. It's not the general bland halacha. I'm telling you what the case is. The case is that it's all of us and one guy. So I don't understand how could it work. So Amar Lahu Kol Betule Rishu Saichu. What?
Why do we need to include the goy in this?
They wanted to find a way to be lenient. That's what they were looking to do. So they wanted to rent from the guy. The guy wouldn't rent, right? He wouldn't. So then they said to Abai, what should we do? And he said, well, Abai is clever. He knows we passing like Rabbi ben Yaakov. So he's like, I have an idea. Everyone be mavatal your rishus. And then we don't have to worry about the guy and the Jew living in the same place because it's one Jew and one guy. And we paskin in the Mishnah like Rabbi ben Yaakov, where the isser of living in the same place as a guy only applies with 2 Yisraelim and a guy, not with one. It's a chap. That's what Abai was saying, is that I want to make it work out. So they said, I don't understand. The only way that leniency ever played out was under the assumption in general that it's rare for one Jew to live with one. But here it's not rare. I'm telling you that this is not based on the halachic assumption. It's the Maseches of how we live here. It's us, the 5 of us who now merged into one, and you, and the goy. So then there, Abai said back to them, you're right. You're right that halacha functions based on an assumption, and that and that assumption is uncommon, right? That it's not common for one Jew to live with one non-Jew and share a mavui. Amrulay, midi, that's what they said to him. And then Amar Lahu, 3 lines from the bottom, Abai says back to them, Kol betule rishusayu gabechad milsa de lo shchicha. It's also rare to come up with a solution like I came up with, that the 5 of you are going to merge into one spot. That's also rare. So therefore, milsa de lo shchicha lo gazer be'rabbanan, and therefore no concern at all. You can be mevatel. So this was all Abai. Also, Rav Huna bred Rav Yeshua, Amar l'shmaisa kamid de Rava. He heard this whole maisa, and he brought it in front of Rava, Abaye's famous contrarian counterpart. Amar le, and Rava was not going to hear it. Amar le, im kain bitalt toras eruv me'oso mavui. If what you're saying is true, then in that case, you've uprooted the whole essence of making an Eruvin a mavui. Because every time you have 2 or more Jews together sharing a place where there's one non-Jew, okay, merge all the cells, everyone's one. And you've uprooted the whole idea of an Eruvin in a mavui. It's unacceptable. So what would, theoretically speaking, what would Abai have said back to Rabbi? Okay, Dema'arve, just make an Eruv so that it doesn't look bad. Rashi, first Rashi on the page, Dema'arve beinehen, afal pi do mahani. It's just for optics. I'm going to put in an Eruv because it looks good, because I don't want to be mavatal the idea of Eruv. But it really, functionally, is irrelevant because all five of us are really one unit. So says the Gemara, Yomru Eruv Mo b'makom nachri. But then they'll think that even Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, he said, you're going to think that the Eruv works with no renting? That doesn't work. People are going to make a mistake. The guy didn't rent. So then says, no, the Machrazina, and they make an announcement and they say, let me just give you the Metzias. This is what happened. They put up, one of those posters and they tell you what happened. Says Gemara, Achraz tel v'dardiki. You're going to tell the children in 3 generations what happened? No, you're messing up the whole system of Eruv b'mavui. So therefore, Rava rejects approach number 1 to this whole solution of blending the 5 people into one rishus and relying on Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov in our Mishnah. Ella Amar Rava, 3 lines from the top of Samach Daled Amud Aleph. What does Rava then answer? Leizel chad minayu. One person should go likarev le. Should make a kesher with the neighbor. And once he has a relationship, he should ask him for a little space to borrow in his house. V'linach bamidi, and you should put something there that's yours. Tehamalei kischiro ulakito. It's as if I work for you. It's as if I work for you. That's what Rashi here points out. If you take a look at Rashi about 12 lines down or so, it's Rashi, Dibur Hamaschel Sachir. Rashi says, Sachir la'avodas kol shana. He's a worker, a year-round worker. Lakit limos haktir v'ha'asif. He's a seasonal worker. We have that in our culture with different aspects. Like we're coming up on the other holiday season, as it were. Amazon right here on Howard, they're going to be filled with people who are driving extra trucks, right? Those are seasonal workers. So either way, if it's as if you're like a year-round worker or a seasonal worker, doesn't make a difference. It's as if you're that person. And here's the kicker for Rav Shita. Once you are able to build a relationship with the guy with whom you share a mavui, enough so that you could quote unquote borrow a space there and leave something in that space, now it's as if you're like his Eved and you're his employee, and we can then allow for an Eruv to take place. Much better. Amar le Abai le Rav Yosef. Okay, Abai is going to entertain. Hayusham chamisha schiro ve'hei lekito. What if 5 different people do it? What if all 5 owners of the chatzeros that share the mavui do the same thing? So all of us, we throw our one thing, we build a kesher. Then I have my spot and you have your spot and everyone has their own spot. What if there's 5, 10 of us, whatever it is? Mahu, machlokes rishonim, what the question is. The pashtus of the Gemara is, do we then say that we need all 5 people to do it, or is one sufficient? Says the Gemara, Amar leim amru schiru ulakito lahakel. No, the fact that we already said it as a leniency, yomru schiru ulakito lahachmir, we're then going to say that until everyone who put their stuff into the rishus of the goy, until they all put it there, then it's not going to work. That's a chumrah. We're not looking for chumras in Eruvin. So this is going to be our leniency. And that's how the Gemara concludes, like the opinion of Rabbi. To review, what happens if there is a non-Jew who doesn't want to rent and you have your Eruvin Chatzeros problem? You can't carry. What are you going to do? So in the way Rabbi recommends it is that you build a kesher with the person and you try to get permission to borrow some space, and then you'll be able to be considered like his worker, and then the Eruv Chatzeros works. Beautiful kula. I wonder if this plays out nowadays. It's a beautiful kula. Okay, Gufa. We're about 10 lines down. Samach Daled Amud Aleph. Amar Yehuda Mar Shmuel. Afilu schiro va'afilu lekito nosen eruvo vidayo. When this line was said, the line that we just saw above, it's being requoted again here, because how did Rav Nachman react to this? That when a person is a worker, ki'ilu, a worker, by having borrowed space in the property of the non-Jew, that it's considered to work. So then in response to that, Amar Rav Nachman, Kama ma'al yahashmaisa. What a beautiful zach, what a beautiful vort, what a great way to solve this problem. Next statement, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Mar Shmuel, Shasa Revis Yayin Al Yore. A person who drinks a revis of wine, that's not so much. Al Yore, you cannot be, it's Yore Yadin Yadin. You can't answer any shilas. This isn't Dayanus. This is regular. Just simple ABCs, just answering basic questions in Shulchan Aruch. Amar Rav Nachman, Lo ma'al yahashmaisa. I like your first vort. I don't like your second vort. Why not? Deha'ana, says Rav Nachman, Kol kama de lo shesina reviyasa dechamra. Whenever I don't drink a revius of wine before learning, lo tzila datoi. My head's not clear. all the stories from when they found out that smoking was dangerous, and a lot of Rabbanim Chashuvim stopped, and people would say, I could never chop a ritva like I could before. Okay, whatever, however it plays out. We'll see that Rav Nachman's going to get blown out of the water right now. It didn't play out well for him. No, we will not be doing that. COVID. It's COVID. Drink at home. It's not, just drive safely. Well, you walk. You live very close. You can drink as much as you want, Joe. That's fine. So the Gemara doesn't like this. About halfway down, Samach Dal and Manalaf, Amar Le Rabba, my time, Amar Mar Hachi. Why would you say such a thing? Ha'amar Rav Acha Bar Chanina, my dechsi v'ro'eh zonos yovad hon. One who shepherds zonos literally translates as prostitutes. Yovad hon, they would lose. Rashi translates hon here as kavoda shel Torah. You'll lose kavod. What does this mean? Here's the explanation of the pasuk. The Gemara's drasha is kol ha'omer shmua, and here's the plan words zu na'eh from the word zona. Zu na'eh. You're using the phrase in a way that you shouldn't be using it. You're taking advantage of the way you understand that pasuk. That's not acceptable. I like a little bit of your Torah, but I don't like all of your Torah. Me'abed hona shel Torah. A gorgeous Rashi just to the right, about 10 lines from the bottom of the page. Hona. What do you lose out on? Kvoda shel Torah v'sofa lishtakech mimenu. It means you're not learning the Torah for its essence. You're learning it for your enjoyment. We don't learn that. Rav Shlomo Volba has a beautiful word about learning Gemara, apropos to a Daf Yomi Shir. Shlomo Volba has a section called Gemara, Limud Gemara, I think is the title. And in it, he has a beautiful line that says like this, Hacheshek bo yavo, aval hahechrech hu tmidi. The desire to learn comes and goes. It waxes and wanes, for sure. But the need to learn is all the way up there, and it's flatline. We always need to learn. It's a beautiful idea. So he was pushing back on him and saying, you don't like the Vort? What are you talking about? This is Torah from the Tanaim. How could you push back on that? So he took the Musar. Omar Le, Hadri B. You're right. I retract. So says Rashi, Hadri B to the right. Where did that Rashi go? It's Rashi 5-6 lines from the bottom. Hadri B, Lo Osif Od. I will no longer comment. But he did not retract his previous comments, which is just an interesting. He still felt that way about the learning, that he felt that the drinking was helpful. But this, of course, leads to a halachic issue, which we are familiar with. This comes up often on Simchas Torah and other chagim. Anytime when a person's really drinking wine and then they have to go daven, how does that work? So this is that sugya in Shas. We'll learn this sugya here, and we'll jump into the Shulchan Aruch for some halacha l'maaseh. Amar Rabbi Bar Rav Huna, Shasui al yispalel. If a person drinks, they should not daven. V'im hispalel tefillah so tefillah. But if in fact they do daven, they're still yotze. Shikur, if you're mamish drunk, al yispal, you should not daven. V'im hispalel tefillah so to'eva. And there it's a zero. There it doesn't count at all. Your tefillah is a zero, and it's considered a to'eva.
It's a zero. If you're tipsy, it's okay.
It says shasui. If you drink, we're going to define them in the Gemara. How do we define them? The Gemara is going to ask, what does it mean that I drank, and what does it mean that I'm drunk? We have to define them, because in the first case it's still b'diavad. You still should wait until it wears off. Even if you're just shasui, even if you just drank a little and you feel a little buzzed, you still should wait. What happens if you're up against Manfil? We'll see in the Shulchan Aruch. That's a real shaila. Yeah, see, we have to make sure that the mitzvah of drinking on Purim doesn't override the mitzvah of davening tefillah b'tzibur. You have to be a mensch about it. You got to be smart. Drink early or don't drink. There's much more of a need to daven tefillah b'tzibur than there is to get slammed on Purim. That's for sure. So let's see how this all plays out. That's what the Gemara says. Amar Rabba bar Huna shasui al yispal v'imhaz yispal tefillah so tefillah. Shikur al yispal. A drunk person should not daven. V'yispal tefillah so toeva. L'may nafkamina. He'd have to daven again. If to daven again, your tefillah is a zero. You're like a child, a babbling. It's a zero. It doesn't count. So how do we define this? Heichi dami shasui, heichi dami shikur. Says the Gemara, Kihad Rav Abba bar Shumani Rav Nasya bar Yirmiyah mi gifti. Havu kamiftare mehadade. These two rabbanim were departing from each other. Amabra de Nahar Yufti. They were at this particular river, and as they were leaving each other, Amru kol chad minan. They said to each other, Lema milsa de lo shmiya lechabre. Let's each say a chiddush, something that I've never heard and something that you've never heard. To Amar Mari bar Rav Huna lo yipater adam echaveru el mitoch dvar halacha shemitoch kach zochrehu. A beautiful idea. Whenever someone on my block is like this, every time he sees me, I have vort on his tongue every time. And yeah, it like has in a way shaped our relationship. It's like a funny thing. Like we always and only talk Torah. It's like the only thing we ever talk about. That he said that's why this is based on the Amoraim, that they had such an idea that if you want to remember someone, always finish a conversation in Torah. So says the Gemara, what was the first of our Torah? Pasachad Amar. One person said, Heichidami Shasui, Heichidami Shikur. He said this same exact thing. We don't even know what the answer is yet, but what's the answer? It says the Gemara, 3 lines from the bottom, Samach Daled Amud Aleph, Shasui kol sheyochel ledaber lifnei hamelech. You're still able to talk before a king. You could straighten your shirt, you could tuck in, you could stand up straight, and you could still be poised, you could still be a little stoic, you can hide it well. That's what the Gemara says. However, shikur, kol she'enu yachal ledaber lifnei hamelech. Don't get lost, by the way. This is not some like sophisticated halachic answer. This is pashut. When you daven, you're talking to a melech. Can you stand like a mensch in front of them? It's very simple. This is not lumdish. This is very simple. Can you speak like a normal person or not? If you can't speak like a normal person, you should not be davening. It's a bizayon. You should not be davening. It says the Gemara, that was a Dvar Torah that one person shared. Pasach idach ve'amar. What did the other person share? The other person shared hamachzik b'nichsei hager. If there are nechasim of a ger, the ger has no family members. If he's a ger, he has no immediate family members from a halachic frame. Let's assume he had none from the Jewish side either. So then, ma yasev iskaim obiyadu. You made money off of that nichsei hager. What do you do with the money? Says the Gemara, yikach ben sefer Torah. You should invest it well. Remember what we're talking about. We're talking about drinking here, and we got our answer from one of the Amoraim when they were leaving each other at the river. And this is just the other answer. It's not really shaykh to our sugya, but it's a beautiful insert. Amar Rav Sheshes, turning to the top of Samach Daled Amud Beis, afilu bal benichsei ishto. Even if the person has a dowry, they have money from when they got married. Invest your money, put it into a sefer Torah. Rav Amar afilu avad iska v'ravach. If you make some money off of an investment, put it into something. Rav Papa Amar afilu matzah mitzia. Even if you find something, you find cash on the table, good. Not on the table. That's a bad place to find cash. You find cash in a place where it's actually considered an aveda. So then, if there's no simanim, then you can keep it. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, "Afilu kasav." The word "behu" is taken out by some of them. Unfortunately, afilu kasav tefillin. It doesn't have to only be sefer Torah, but you should invest the money. And some of the Meforshim here point out. Rashi at the top says this as well. The second line of Rashi. Vishalta behu ein abisha. The concern is that if you use that money in your regular life, it could generate vishalta be ein abisha. It could be an ein har. So you should be careful to make sure that you don't flaunt the things that you picked up along the way. Says the Gemara of Amar of Chanan v'Itamer of Chanina Mikra. What's the pasuk that supports all of these ideas that one should take the monies that they find throughout their life, whatever they may be, all the extra money as it were, quote unquote, and they should do something special with it. Tichsi v'Yidar Yisrael neder. Okay, so based on the pasuk. Amar Rami bar Abba. Derech mil v'shena kolshu mefigen esayayin. If a person has drunk a little bit, then what they should do is derech mil. They should walk a meal, which is machlokes about 18 minutes or 22 minutes or 24 minutes. Machlokes there about how far. This is approximately a mile. And sleep, taking a short nap. Kolshu mefigen esayayin. They do detract from the power, from the alcoholic effects of wine. Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rabbi bar Avua lo shana al kshashasa kedei revis. That's only true if all you drank was a revis. Aval shasa yoser me revis. If you drank more than that, says the Gemara, then it has the opposite effect. Kol shekain, all the more so sheder toradato v'shena maskarto. That walking will make you a little bit more crazed, and sleep will make you more drunk. Says the Gemara, v'derech mil mefigas hayayin. One meal is sufficient for reducing the inebriation. How is that even possible? We have a long brisa here, almost a third of the page, and we will see within here something that argues the one meal argument. We'll see that there's a greater shear in this brisa, a great story as well.
And take the class of a shot of wine and a beer equals the same thing.
You mean drinking followed by water, drinking followed by water?
No, it equals to amount a shot of cups of wine.
I don't know if the Gemara is going to be mechalik. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I know the Gemara here is not mechalik. So it says the Gemara as follows: the derech mil mefiga sayayin. We're 10 lines down. But Tanya, how could you say that only one mile is sufficient? Approximately 1 mile is sufficient to reduce the effects of the wine. But Tanya, the Brisa writes: Ma'aseh b'Rabban Gamliel shahaya rochev ala chamor v'hema alech me'akol lechziv. Rabban Gamliel was riding on a donkey, and he was traveling from Akko in the northern part of Eretz Yisrael to Chziv. Rabbi Eloi mahalech acharav, and Rabbi Eloi was with him. Matzah gluskin baderech. They found some type of Danish or pastry while they were traveling. Omar lo, he said to Rabbi Eloi, Eloi told gluskin mina derech, pick it up off the ground. It's not mechubed, pick it up off the ground. Matzah nachri echad, as they were walking, a non-Jew passed them. Omar lo, prophetically, Rabban Gamliel seems to know his name. He says, Mavgoi. He says to the non-Jew, that was his name. Mavgoi told Gluskin halolu me'iloi. You, the non-Jew, your name is Mavgoi. Take this thing. We can't eat it. Take it from take it from Eloi, from my friend here. Nitzvah lo Rabbi Eloi. And Rabbi Eloi gave it to him. He took it from Rabbi Eloi. Omar lo, so Rabbi Eloi was talking to this person, to the Nachri who was walking. Mehechanata, where are you from? Omar lo, mi ayaros shel Borganim. I'm from the cities of Borganim. Uma shimcha, what's your name? Mavgoy shemeni. My name is Mavgoy. And he looks at him, he's like, Mavgoy? Rabbi Gamliel just called you Mavgoy. Klumi kircha Rabbi Gamliel me'olam. Have you ever met Rabbi Gamliel that he should know your name? Omar lo lab. At that moment, Rabbi Eloi recognized that there was Ruach HaKodesh halfway down, Samach Daled Amud Beis, almost smack middle in the page. So then at that time, the Brisa continues. There are three things that we learned at that time. Number one, we learned that we should pick up food from the floor. I don't know if this would help if I told my children that Daf Yomi says to clean up after yourselves. I'm not sure that it would be helpful. We also follow the rove in regards to food, namely that this food was probably from an akum. It's pas akum, and therefore you should not be eating it if you're a yid, but you still picked it up. You see the chakira. You're supposed to pick it up even if it's not for you, but you're not allowed to eat it if it's not for you. We also learned that if this is presumably near the time of Pesach, that's obviously the assumption of the Gemara, or whatever the case may be, is that we assume that it's Chametz Sharva Pesach. We therefore see that by a goy that there's no Isser Hana of Chametz Sharva Pesach. Chametz by us is an Isser Hana. You're allowed to pick it up. You're allowed to give it to a goy and you get the Hana of the relationship. Whatever your Hana you're getting, no Hana at all, not allowed. So says the Gemara. This was actually so the Brisa continues. When Rabbi Eloi and Rabbi Gamliel got to Chziv, someone wanted to do Ataras Nadarim. Omar lazeh she'imo klum shasina revis yain ha'italki. Did we drink a revis of wine while we were out? How much did we drink? Omar lohein, he said, yes, we in fact drank a revis of yain ha'italki. In Cain, if that's true, says Rabbi Gamliel, yitay lachareinu achiyafi genenu. You can follow us. We need to walk off our alcohol. And how far did they go? Remember where we started. How far did they go? And they traveled 3 meals. You told me a half a page ago that it was only 1 meal was sufficient. Why here did Rabbi Gamliel have to walk 3 meals? Let's finish the brisa before we try to answer the question. Once they got to that place, he got off of the camel. He wrapped his head, which was appropriate. That was the dress of the dayan. And he sat down. And he did hataras nadarim for him. A lot of things can be learned from this story. Number one, we are concerned that even one revis of yain ha'italki, seemingly a stronger wine, could make a person drunk enough that they cannot do anything reasonable. They can't do anything halachic. V'lamanu shikur al yoreh. We also know that one revis would halachically which made him drunk, that he cannot be yoreh. V'lamanu shederech mifiga es hayayin. We also learn that travel lightens the impact of wine. V'lamanu she'ein mafir nadarim lo rachav lo mahalach lo omeid. All of the details picked up upon. We also learned that you cannot be made for neder while you're riding on an animal, not while you're standing, not while you're standing, not while you're walking, not while you're standing, rather like you are sitting. End of brisa. Very long. Katani mihas. Whenever you see those words, katani mihas, you know that you're being asked the question, shlosha milin. So we started at the top of the page to say that 1 meal is sufficient for reducing the impact of wine. This brisa taught us 3, says the Gemara, shiny yain ha'italki d'mishaker tfei. You got to look at the proof on the bottle. So when you look at the wine of yain ha'italki, it's a more powerful wine, and therefore it's equivalent to effectively being more than 1 revis. Let's say 2 or 3, whatever there is, it's more than a revis. I ve'amar of Nachman amar Rabbi bar avua lo shanu el shashasa revis. Aval shasa yoser me revis, like this yain ha'italki, which granted was 1 revis, but it's an equivalent to more revios. Kol shekain shederach torad toveshena mashkarto. So I don't understand. If the yain ha'italki is what made you drunk, and if it's therefore more than the equivalent of a revis, then you shouldn't have walked anywhere, because that will make it worse. That's what the Gemara said above. Says the Gemara, Rachav shiny. He was riding on an animal. It's different. The whole thing is different. He was riding on an animal, so you can't compare. Says the Gemara, if that's true, then we need to go all the way back up to the top of the page where Rami Bar Abba told us What did he say? He's 6 lines down. Rami bar Abba, derech meal is mefigan es hayayin. Says the Gemara, if that's true, he's riding an animal. He says, Rami bar Abba nami lo kasha, rachav shayni. We should have said anyways, the whole case of Rabban Gamliel is not comparable. 1 meal, 3 meal. The whole question falls apart from the beginning, from 20 lines ago, because he was riding an animal. He wasn't walking. And the assumption of, what was the name again? Rami bar Abba was that you were walking, not riding an animal. And that's how the Gemara concludes that we reject the question altogether. And when you are riding an animal, the laws are not the same. So if we had to review this section, we'd say as follows. If you're walking, 1 meal for a revius, and you should not be walking if it is more than a revius. Yain ha'italki is very powerful and equivalent to more revios, and you should therefore be very careful, and you should also not walk there. But what was Rabban Gamliel doing? He was riding an animal, and that seems to help. You should ride an animal 3 meal if you drink yain ha'italki. So that would be the way to summarize the Gemara up until here. Let's just take a brief pause to look at the Shulchan Aruch and Siman Tzadi Tes or Achaim Tzadi Tes to learn some of the halachos of drinking as it relates to davening. The Shulchan Aruch writes in Tzadi Tes Aleph, Shasa Yain Kedei Revis. If a person drinks 1 revis of wine, not a lot. Machlokes, of course, famously, the Chaz Nishan of Chaim Na, is it 3.3 ounces or 5.6 ounces? Al Yispalel Ad Sheyasir Yeno, until his wine has dissipated. That requires some parameters as well. The Mishnah Berurah here writes, let's say your tolerance level is very high, so maybe it doesn't apply to me. You should still wait. Even if you have no sense of it at all, you should wait. So let's say, for example, let's say a person is running to mincha, and they're about to bench, and the balabais gives him a cup of wine. So l'chora, dude, which one is the hidur? I'm asking a shaila. I'm not answering. What is the hidur? Is it to be mavarech alakos, take him a low lugmav to be yotze the drink, but don't drink a revis? Rov kos? Like, how does all that interplay with waiting to daven? Okay, that's din number 1. Shulchan Aruch continues that if you drink more than a revis, shasa yoser, imu yachol ladaber lifnei hamelech. Distinction our Gemara made. If you can still talk like a mensch before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, imispalal tefillah so tefillah. Right? Our Gemara makes it right here into the Shulchan Aruch from Eruvin Samach Daled. And the imenu yachol ladaber lifnei hamelech, your mamish, you're foaming at the mouth, you can barely talk straight. Imispalal tefillah so toeva, v'tzarech lachzor ulehispalal k'sheyasir yeno me'alav. Your davening does not count. If you drink enough that you can't talk straight, your davening doesn't count. One last din, and then we'll stop with this part and then go back to the Gemara. If you're so drunk that you can't talk, and there's 10 minutes left until you can say mincha or mar, whatever tefillah you're up to, please don't daven. It's a busha v'cherpa. You should not daven. Wait until you have calmed down. Daven a tashlumin in the next davening. Very powerful. Which is interesting because maybe you weren't just shogging on the drinking. Maybe you were amazing. We don't care. We look at that as a shogging. It's hard sometimes to draw the line. So you drank too much. And Rashi here, the Ramah here adds very powerfully, Haga, v'din kriyas shema kedin tefillah. Wow, you can't even say shema. It's a din d'oraisa. It's an unbelievable din. Unbelievable. Very powerful. So one should be careful when they're drinking, certainly by shema. Most of davening is derabbanan, but kriyas shema is a din d'oraisa. One should be very careful to not drink too much.
I thought we were talking about Mita.
Didn't distinguish. The next sentence was about birchos kriyas shema in the Ramah. So I think it's talking about the mitzvah d'oraisa of shema. You're incapable of speaking at that point. You're a zero as it relates to saying Shema. So l'chora, the Ramah is talking about Shema like regular Shema, to be yotzei din d'oraisa of Shema. So we have to measure ourselves. It's not hard. You have to, you can drink, just drink in a measured way. Let's continue. Says the Gemara, we are about 10, 11 lines from the bottom of the page to the last 2 shorter lines. Eini, is it true that you can only be mefer neder sitting down? The exact opposite of what we learned. We tried to say, we learned from the Bryce of Rabban Gamliel that you cannot be standing, you cannot be walking, you have to be sitting down. Tanoi, he says, the Gemara Tzemach in the Tanoi. What does it mean, poschen becharata, that you open with trying to generate charata? So it was customary, this is one track in the Rishonim how to understand this, it was customary that when you start talking to someone who made a neder, you make them you make them regret their neder out of the gates. Like, you really made a bad call here. You shouldn't have done that. And let's see how that plays out. Oh, and I should say, posting becharata, that's a more sophisticated conversation. It's kind of like, Okay, we need to have a real conversation. Sit down. What were you thinking? So there you have to sit down. That's where the Tanaim say you have to sit down. But if it's ein poskin becharata, if you're not having that difficult conversation of why did you take this neder in the first place, then you don't need to sit down. So Amar Rabba Bar Bar Chana Amar Rabbi Yochanan my pasach le Rabban Gamliel hu gavra. In that brisa, what did Rabban Gamliel say to that person to generate charata? What did he say in order to force that person to think a little bit more? So it says that this is a pasuk. The pasuk reads, Yesh boteh kemad kiros cherev. There are those who speak like sharp swords. Ulashon chachamim marpeh. And the words of the chachamim can help them, can heal them. What's the drasha? Third line of the widest lines. 7 lines from the bottom. Kol abote, anyone who says a habata, they say a bitui in their mouth, they say something. Roi ledokro b'cherev. Really, they should have been poked with a sword. But you have the option of being matir neder. Good. Omar Mar, vein ma'avirin ala ochlan. This is going to be our last sugya for the night. We'll end on the very last line of the page. Omar Mar, vein ma'avirin ala ochlan. We learned in the brisa of Rabban Gamliel that we should not pass by food that's on the ground. Amar Rabbi Yochanan nishrum Reb Shimon ben Yochai. Lo shanu ela b'doros harishonim shein benos Yisrael prutos b'kshafim. It used to be that in the old generations that the benos Yisrael were not putting kishuv, these types of incantations, as I guess, that they were putting them on the bread. But where we are concerned about some of the incantations that might have been put on the food, and that those have spiritual concerns, even if not physical, there ma'avirin, you can still leave the food on the ground. Tana, we learn shleimin ma'avirin, the whole ones, those are the ones where they put the incantations. But pasisin, the ones that were just crumbs, ein ma'avirin, you should still pick those up because no one will make the incantations on the small ones. Amar le Ravasi, the Ravashi pasisin lo avdan. They wouldn't do kshafin on the small pieces of bread. Yes, they for sure would. V'aksiv, as the pasuk says, v'atechalelena osi el ami b'shali seorim. So we see there in the pasuk that they would put their curses on pieces of bread. Says the Gemara, no, that reference of pitute lechem, the crumbs, hasam deshakli b'agrayu, that was being used as barter. That wasn't what they were putting curses on. All the curses were always put on big pieces of bread, but the small ones you would be allowed to pick up. We'll stop right here. Wishing you all a beautiful night. Amir Hashem tomorrow night. Daf Samachin. Call 2.